Today's topic, dealing with attachment, is fear, which is my all-time, big-time specialty. So I'm a little bit afraid to give this talk right now because I'm afraid I'm going to blow it. And so, of course, when that mind comes up, there's some attachment to reputation. So as I was getting this talk together, I found this one actually quite difficult to wrap my mind around because fear is really so prevalent in my mind, certain days, certain hours. So there's a lot of things that I can do about it, and I won't cover all of the antidotes in this talk, but perhaps some of these things will be helpful to you. So when I think about fear, I have to remember that this is a mental state that is a disturbed mental state. It's an afflicted mental state. And I think before coming to the Dharma, I just thought it was just part of a person's mental landscape because it's been so much a part of my mental landscape. So I didn't see it as an afflicted mental state. There's two kinds of fear I've discovered. There's wisdom fear, which I'm not so familiar with, and then there's just the regular kind of fear. So maybe I'll start with the wisdom fear that I do know about. If I start really thinking about the fact that the time of death is unknown, I get quite terrified. And I think that's a good kind of fear, because then I think, well, first of all, if I was going to die this afternoon, I am not ready because I haven't purified enough, and I haven't created enough merit, and I haven't also talked to people that I need to talk to apologize for being a jerk, or I haven't forgiven certain people. So there's so many things I haven't done that makes me fearful. And so that is actually a wisdom fear, because I see I really need to practice. I can't postpone practice. I can't put it off till tomorrow. I have to really take advantage of the opportunities to practice, even while offering service, when I'm being very attentive. So that's one kind of wisdom fear. Let's see, what else did I have about that? Yeah. So then the other kind of fear that I'm the expert on. One of the ways that I get into trouble, which is a family trait on my mom's side, is worrying. So my mother's side of the family were experts. We're professional worriers. There should be an Olympic game category of people getting together and worrying. And my family would win, no doubt in my mind. So worrying falls into this thing that we were talking about, that I was talking about yesterday, called inappropriate attention. So one of the things that can get me really ramped up these days is worrying about my elderly parents, who both have dementia. And I can start with, okay, so they have caregivers. That's a good thing. But what if the caregivers aren't being kind to them? What if the caregivers are frustrated and they're maybe even mean to them, which I don't think happens. But the worrying mind doesn't consider that. The worrying mind goes and makes stories. What if they're being ignored? What if they're being neglected? And all the suffering that creates in that kind of person with that kind of situation. So I can create this whole scenario about how my parents are not being cared for. And then, once a week I make a phone call to my sister, and so what I have to do is I have to subdue my fears by asking specific questions, like, how is it going? And when I get answers to these questions, that drops my fear. And then other people will go and visit my parents, and they will assure me that they've got the best care that they could possibly get right now. And in my mom's situation, she has one-to-one caregiving. And that is a situation that simply many people in the world don't have. And fortunately, my parents created the karma in their lifetime to have the resources where we can pay for these caregivers. Many people in the world, they end up in facilities where they might be so old that they've actually outlived all of their family and their relatives and friends. So they're completely alone in these facilities, and no one goes to see them. So when I start asking myself to get real, when my worrying mind just takes off into orbit, I just keep having to say to myself, what of this is real? What if this is really going on? And then if it is a worst case scenario where I know that my mom is really suffering out of loneliness, then the next step I have to take is, well, what can I do about that? And right now, if I'm here at the Abbey and I'm not there, well, I can do a lot of prayers, and I can also make prayers for people who are in my mom's situation. They don't have the support she has. So when I turn my attention to other people, that really helps me get out of this self-centered, really suffering state of mind that is so painful. And, if I'm in pain, what good does that do for my mom or my dad? It doesn't help them at all. So, I have to keep checking my mind and asking myself, what's real? What can I do? So that's very helpful. Then the other way I can deal with my worrying mind is, Venerable Kacha was here on Memorial Day weekend, and we were having a retreat on dealing with death and dying, and she talked about this practice of writing an ethical will. And this is a very beautiful thing to do for anybody that you know in your life, not just people who are elderly, but since we don't know when we're going to die, which can be a source of fear, I have decided right now that I'm going to write, and I've started writing letters to people that I care about, that I've had interactions with, and to just express my gratitude to these people for what they've done for me in this lifetime, and how I appreciate what they've done for others, not just me, in this life. And what a wonderful gift to give someone. And also, it's a great thing to do when I start worrying again, which is fear-driven. And so it's a great practice that you might consider trying, an ethical will, expressing our gratitude to others in the form of a letter. Okay. When I was in Taiwan for the Bhikshuni training, I experienced levels of fear that some days went right off the chart. It was just right off the chart. And the reason for that is that I often didn't know what was going on. So I didn't know what was expected of me. I didn't know what to do. And this created huge anxiety. Some days it was so intense that my adrenal glands were actually aching. I was just so fearful. So after about the first 3 days of this going on, I just sat myself down and had to give myself a talk because no one else would. I said, okay, you can go through the next 30 days like this, which will be truly miserable, or you've got to get a grip on this right now. So I said, ask whoever you can and get information. And when that doesn't work, because most people there didn't speak English, or if they did, it was just a little, I thought, okay, I don't know what's going on. Some days I'm getting reprimanded for not knowing what to do because I didn't know what to do, and that would bring suffering. And I thought to myself, okay, so I don't know what I'm doing. And this is the wheel of sharp weapons coming around. I have created the causes and conditions to be feeling this kind of fear. Maybe not in this lifetime, but for sure in a past lifetime. So here it is. It's the wheel of sharp weapons coming around. This fear is related to those past actions. So karma is ripening. Now, what I didn't think about doing, which I read about the other day, is that I didn't think about purifying that fear. And the other day I read about a talk that Venerable gave where she was talking about dealing with her own fear and anxiety. And so first of all, I was sort of blown out of the water to think that Venerable Children has struggled with fear, because this is not the person I see now, but she's a human being. And so she talked about sitting down, or doing the 35 Buddha practice, or doing Vajrasattva practice, and bringing to mind what might have been the causes for her to experience fear. So in her talk, she talked about the fact that maybe in a past life, she was a prison warden, or some kind of, guard in a prison. Maybe in the past, she was in charge of an orphanage, and she wasn't too kind to the kids in the orphanage. So we can bring to mind any scenario where we might have brought fear to others. And we don't remember it, but now we have these fearful experiences, and to purify that. So I'm a bit embarrassed to say that I didn't come to that conclusion before 2 days ago, but there it is. So now I have many topics to purify when we do these practices, and I'm very happy about that. The other thing I did in Taiwan is that I had the Pearl of Wisdom book with me, and so quite often we would line up and just wait for something to happen. And this, of course, made me scared because I didn't know what we were lining up for. And so I would turn to the homage to the 21 Buddha, 21 Tara practice, which is in this book. And of course, the second line is homage to Tara, swift and fearless. So I thought, Tara's fearless. I don't have to be fearful right now. So I'd read the book, and of course, this got some sort of glances from people. And then someone would say to me, are you doing a Tantra practice right now? And I would just say, well, I'm just reading a prayer. So it really helped my mind to read that prayer. And then I'd start doing mantras. Whenever we were standing around and I didn't know what we were standing around for, I would do Tara's mantra, and that would help me settle down. Sometimes I'll get fearful when I think that people don't have a good opinion about what I'm doing. So I'm caring about what other people think. And a few years ago in an EML course, Venerable Children talked about having not a concern about what others think of us, but what do the wise ones think of us? And I have never forgotten that. So when I get bent out of shape and worrying about what other people think of me, I just think, okay, that's really not productive, because I can't control what other people think about me. If they want to think I'm a jerk, they can go ahead and think I'm a jerk. But I really care about what my teachers think about me. And so if I'm doing something that's going to disappoint them, or, you know, anything that would be very harmful to my practice or harmful to others, then I really think about what does Venerable Children think is important, or what does His Holiness think is important. And that really helps me settle down when I get going in that direction. A few years ago, I went through a period of having anxiety attacks. And the worst place to have an anxiety attack is on an airplane that is 33,000 feet up in the air. And this happened to me a few times, and I can tell you that was terrible suffering. So what would happen is I'd start thinking a thought, and then I'd realize, hey, wait a minute, I'm on a plane. We're 33,000 feet in the air. And I'd break into a sweat, and I'd start shaking, and I'd start hyperventilating. My heart rate would just go through the roof. And so one of the things you can do is you can sort of push your carotid artery, and that makes your heart slow down. You can go into the bathroom and splash cold water on your face, and that sort of helps. But the thing that helped the most was I thought, okay, I've got to take refuge because I think I'm going to die. So I would take refuge in the 3 jewels, I would chant mantra, and very slowly my heart rate would come down. But it was a terrible experience. But I can tell you that chanting, well, I wasn't chanting out loud, of course, because that would make people around me feel weird, but it really helped. And then, because I knew that I wasn't the only one feeling afraid, I would start looking around. And actually, I would see, in the midst of this panic, I would see other people looking very uncomfortable. So I'd see people rubbing their hands and squeezing their hands and looking very agitated, and so then I'd start making prayers for them. And any time that I can take my attention off of me and to others, it really is helpful. So the next time you're flying on an airplane, if you're not afraid, just take a look around. There's people who are really sweating it. There was one flight, I'll never forget it. I was right across from this guy. I think he might have been a football player. He had to be 300 pounds at least, and he was solid muscle. And he was sitting like this for most of the flight, and he was shaking, and he was sweating. And the sweat was pouring off this man. So I felt terrible for him. And I knew, well, I don't know what he was going through. So I just said prayers for him, just knowing that whatever was going on for him was very, very scary. So the last thing that I have to be scared about, but something new will come up tomorrow. The latest thing that's on my mind is we've discovered that my family history is loaded with people having macular degeneration, which is a situation where you can go blind. And if it's the wet form, you can go blind quite quickly, in weeks or months. And if it's the dry form, you go blind just progressively. And so every one of my mom's side of the family has this in varying forms, and my dad has it. So when I get thinking about this, I can actually get quite scared about the possibility of going blind. And I was talking to one of the people who come here who's an ophthalmologist, and he was saying they've done studies on what people are the most afraid of as far as sense faculties. And no surprise, people are most afraid of going blind. They're not so afraid of going deaf or losing the ability to speak. But blindness is a big one, because that really takes away our independence. So when I get really freaked out about this, I think about the fact that many people are totally blind and they function quite well. And there's many supports for people who are limited in vision or blind. So I think as time goes on, if this is my destiny, I can take advantage of these supports. And also right now, if this is my destiny, every time I see a sunrise like this morning, it was just gorgeous. I just have to really enjoy seeing while I can. And then of course I don't know if this is my fate. I don't know if I have it. I'll find out at the end of August if this is where I'm headed. But you know, so again, this inappropriate attention I may not have is a very painful way of spending one's life. So I just have to keep telling myself when the inappropriate attention starts, I have to say in a very firm voice, stop. Just stop it. You know, turn your attention to something beneficial. So that's where I'm at these days with fear. I haven't conquered it. It will be something that I think I'll live with for the rest of my life. But as I do more practice, I'm hoping I can cut it at the root more quickly.